Hey, everybody, welcome to the Aligned Love Podcast. This is the place where I am going to help you find the one thing that you feel is missing: healthy love. I am your host, Lauren Zoller, and in this podcast, I will share with you how to attract love, live in alignment, and elevate your deepest relationships. So, buckle up, get present, tune into your body, and open up to the possibility that you truly do get to have it all. Let's dive in.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the next episode of the Align Love podcast. Today, I have the incredible Jillian Turecki on the show. Jillian is a renowned relationship coach, teacher, author, and host of the podcast, Jillian on Love. Fueled by an insatiable curiosity about what makes a relationship thrive, Jillian has helped thousands over the last 20 years through her teachings, courses, and writings to revolutionize their relationship with themselves so that they can transform the romantic relationships. Jillian is sought out for her compassionate, direct, and very authentic style of coaching, teaching, and writing. I have been following Jillian for years, and I am so excited to chat with her all about love and her brand new book. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Okay, Jillian, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Been following your work for a long time. And I know that you just had an incredible book that just came out, which I have been able to read a little bit of, and we're going to talk about today, which is
Amazing.
Very exciting. Yeah. We're going to be talking today about some truths around It Begins With You, which is what I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
And I want to know what inspired this title of It Begins With You, because we talk a lot and you speak a lot in your work about how you have to do the inner work first, and you really need to be able to understand that to have deep partnership and to understand truths in partnership. So what inspired you to write this book and dive in?
I went through a very painful marriage. It only lasted 2 years. And it was just the relationship, not the whole relationship, but the marriage was really, really painful. And I didn't know how to make it better. And I was accepting things that I shouldn't have accepted. I just didn't have the tools. And it ended really abruptly. And it ended also during a time where my mom was dying of terminal cancer. And it happened. The ending happened over text. And so I entered a very, very dark and deep night of the soul. And I became obsessed with trying to figure out what makes a relationship work, because I could not believe that I was in the position that I was in. And one of the most humbling and important discoveries that I made was that, clearly I am the common denominator in my life and in my relationship. That does not mean that the problem is necessarily me. It doesn't mean it's not about blame. Someone else could be much more of the problem than you are, but it still begins with you, because we are the common denominator in our relationships. It means whether we are to blame or not is actually irrelevant. It's not part of the equation. It's just that we have to be the change that we wish to see in our lives, and in specifically to this book, in our love lives. And so we have to be willing to understand ourselves, to understand our patterns, to understand how we've been making decisions and the choices that we've made. And that instead of feeling like a victim to your circumstances, like a breakup will kind of make you feel, for sure, let's figure out a way to change your relationship destiny, if you will. And that's what I discovered over the last almost 11 years of my life, and how important that is. And that's what I help others do as well. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's amazing. And that's such an incredible wake up to have. And I work in the dating and relationship space too, in the somatic world. And I always say that there comes a point in your journey where you have to recognize, like, it does start with me. And again, we're not in the space of blame, but when we can step in the space of curiosity around why certain things are happening, it empowers us to shift the way that relationships show up for ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because then if we don't, then we just feel totally helpless and hopeless. And first of all, to feel helpless and hopeless and to feel like, oh, well, it must just be that I have bad luck, or it must just be that I'm not good enough, or it must just be that all men are this way or all women are that way. That's such an disempowering feeling.
Yeah.
That just makes you feel more out of control than we already do living this life, right? So I wanted to really point out to people how to take their power back and to make change.
Yeah. What was that like for you in taking your power back? Because I know, in my own personal journey, there was the way that I describe it to a lot of my clients is that we have these moments in our lives where we build what I like to call case files.
Yeah.
Like it's really easy for us to say, I'm not enough. I am unlovable. Everyone always leaves. And for us to continue to orient to that because it's something that feels so alive in our body. And we have this really familiar track record of building that case file. And I think for me, the hardest part was being able to say, okay, well, I can sit here and say that everybody leaves, but yet I have all of these people in my life that have never left. My best friends, I have family members, and choosing to orient to that was part of my journey. So I'm curious, what was that like for you? What was that moment where you were like, I could feel into victim. I could continue to stay here. But by beginning with me and taking radical responsibility, I can shift some things. What was that journey like for you?
It was a little different for me. For me, it was more like, so my husband left and my mom, and then eventually a couple of months later, my mom died. And so the two greatest sources of certainty and stability and safety, what I thought was safe in him, left. And so I was forced to confront something very old inside of me, which was meaning it had been there for a long time, an old wound, which was how am I going to start to feel safety in my body and in my life without the presence of a man and without the presence of my mom, and I had lost my stepfather. So how am I actually going to cultivate this inner certainty and this independence, if you will? And so that was my journey. That was the shift that I really needed to make, was to cultivate things inside of myself that I really need. It was basically me learning how to meet certain needs that I had never fully learned how to meet in the past. And so that was really the profound step that I took. And, it's definitely not an overnight process. It was messy, it was like steps forward, steps back. But, a big part for me was sort of building. I was a yoga teacher for many years. And so I had always worked with people in the mind-body connection. I loved what I did, but I was very stuck because I thought a part of me wanted to just like be a mom and be a wife. And I would just like continue to do yoga. And another part of me felt called to do something bigger, but I didn't know what that was. And so little did I know at the time that with this traumatic event in my life, I was ushered into this space where I actually had to build something. And through building it, I created meaning and created some purpose out of the pain, as people would say. But I also learned how to create a deeper sense of self. And that's what I needed.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's beautiful that you pointed out that it took time.
Yeah.
And that it's messy. It's so messy. Like that process, regardless of where you are, is never,
yes.
right? It's never an easy process. And I think that a lot of times on social media, and that's what I love so much about your work, it's touted as if it's this kind of magical, the dark night of the soul can be something that you can move through quickly.
Yeah.
And yet it's something that really does take time and effort. And even when you feel like you've come home to self, there's so many layers.
So many layers. And, growth sometimes feels like you're dying.
Yep. Always. Yeah. So You have this, we're going to talk about these 9 truths. And I'm curious to know, can we jump right into them? That's the first question. And then the second question I have is, there's got to be one that feels like it's hard hitting. That's like the first truth that every person should start with. And that might feel like it's the hardest one. What do you feel like that is when you're thinking about
I think it's the one that I started with and why I titled the book, It Begins With You. I think that's the first truth in the title, because you can't really move on to the other truths until you really understand that. And I think that I think it could be hard hitting because, we don't want to like look within. We don't want to see that maybe it's our choices. We don't want to see that, change is hard, and we don't want to look at the ways in which we have to change. And then some people have such a habit of being so hard on themselves that it's so triggering to see that maybe they are, that they play a role in whatever is not working in their life, that somehow that they are, unwittingly contributing to some of their suffering. And so, yeah, I think that might be it. I mean, I think there's, for every person reading the books, there's going to be certain truths that hit a lot harder than others. And it really just depends on the person. But I do think the first truth and the last truth, which is you have to make peace with your parents, are going to be the two that are really going. And that's why I decided to bookend the book with those 2 truths. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you a high achieving woman who is tired of swiping left and right, hoping to find the love of your life? Are you ready to break free from toxic relationships and finally create a deep, lasting connection with someone who truly aligns with your heart and soul? Well, I want to introduce you to the Align Love Collective, a transformative 6-month coaching container designed to help you find your soulmate without sacrificing your career or wasting any more time on the dating apps. In the Align Love Collective, you'll embark on a journey of self-discovery and personal growth. Our team of expert coaches and therapists will guide you through a proven process to discover the root of what's keeping you from finding your soulmate. Understand how to get your nervous system in alignment with what you desire. Then watch it all unfold as you implement the roadmap that will lead you straight into the arms of the one you love. But that's not all. When you join the Align Love Collective, you become a part of a supportive community of like-minded individuals, all on their own journeys to finding the love that aligns with their deepest desires. You'll receive ongoing support through live coaching sessions and exclusive resources to help you every step of the way. Plus, you'll gain access to guest experts to ensure that you have the tools that you need for success. Don't settle for anything less than the love you deserve. Join the Align Love Collective and discover the path to a healthy, lasting love. If you want to learn more, visit my website at www.laurenzahler.com/soulmate, SOULMATE, to learn more. The Align Love Collective, where love and alignment go hand in hand.
Well, and saying that too, I feel like those two mirror each other so well, because you can't really, at least in my experience, when I work with clients too, I mean, we spend almost 4 months looking at your parental dynamics, because you can't, it's oftentimes hard for you to step into responsibility for the way that relational dynamics show up for you.
Yes.
If you're not looking at the first intimate relationship that you ever had, which was your relationship with your mother and your father, or your caretaker, primary caretaker.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just investigating the story around that, and just, and this idea of it begins with you is, you might have very good reason to blame your mom or your dad or your past, but at some point you have to examine that story, because if you continue to just be in that story of someone else is to blame for the reason why your love life isn't where you want it to be, or your marriage is falling apart, whatever it is, it just doesn't work like that. Unfortunately, we have to be able to, and it's not a punishment to look within. It's not a punishment. It's really just about building self-awareness. And I want people to feel freedom from their story, free from whatever it is that's been holding them back.
Yeah. I don't know if you resonate with this, but there was a moment in my own personal journey too, where because I think it's natural and normal for people to start in blame when they start to look at their dynamics with mom and dad. I don't know if that was similar to you too, but there was this moment that happened as I continued to kind of dive in and lean into responsibility, where that blame shifted into compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, wow, mom and dad reacted this way because they never felt this sense of deep worthiness. They never felt this sense of belonging and acceptance.
Yes.
And that was so huge for me, because I knew that in that moment, when you have compassion, you recognize like mom and dad didn't have access to Jillian's book.
Yeah.
Like they didn't have access to the things that we have access to now in a healing perspective. That was huge for me to shift from that space of blame to compassion. And I don't know if that resonates with you or if it was similar for you too.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a journey. I think it's, one of the sort of transitions or even things that we grieve that's sort of built into the reality of life is that as we become adults, we start to see our parents as just another person.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like two sides of the same coin. And on one side, we're sort of like grieving this, oh my God, you mean you're not perfect? You're not just mom, you're not just dad, right? And then, that compassion that I think comes, it's the empathy of, maybe it's becoming a parent yourself for the first time. And then you finally realize how difficult it is. And then you can have empathy for what your mom and your dad went through. And then with that empathy, then you can start to, your heart softens a little bit around some of the criticism that you've had of them. And so, I think that when we can start to see our parents as sort of fallible, look, and there's certain circumstances that are really incredibly intense, but I think it's either compassion, or if, you were terribly abused and maybe you can't find compassion, hopefully you can arrive to a space where you don't take it as personally.
Yeah. Yeah. You step into neutrality, which can also be really big when you're stepping into the relationship in the dating space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you feel like, and I wonder your thoughts on, there are a lot of people that listen to this podcast who have been on this journey for a little while. And they've started the path with looking at their family dynamics, looking at their dynamics generationally, because that can always affect the way that you date. Where do you really feel like, or what are some telltale signs, I guess I should say, if somebody have feeling like they've been working at it for a while and they're still not seeing shifts in the way that relationships show up for them in the dating world, in relationships? Where do you think they go next?
Well, there's obviously then a blind spot. There's something that they're missing. And so I would work with someone skilled who can point out those blind spots. But another thing you can do if you don't have those resources is start with your beliefs. What do you believe about love? What do you believe about relationships? What do you believe about men if you date men? What do you believe about women? Because sometimes when we get frustrated because we're not seeing a shift, and this applies to anyone in any part of life, usually what that speaks to is some sort of internal conflict.
Yeah.
So like, for example, you can say, I want a relationship. I yearn for a relationship. I long to be loved, but I don't trust love.
Yeah.
Or I long to be in a relationship with a man, but I also kind of hate them. Or I long to be in a relationship with a woman, but I'm resenting them. So we have to look at something that is happening on an unconscious level and bring it to conscious awareness of an internal conflict that might be getting in the way of that which you say you really want.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people say that they want, A, B, C, but then their choices reflect otherwise. So we have to one thing that someone can do is just kind of examine their beliefs and see where they might be having some sort of internal conflict about something.
Yeah. Yeah. And letting yourself get really honest about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think, again, which I'm sure so beautifully put, that ties all back to the first truth.
Yes.
Because
exactly.
that can be so hard. It's so hard. It's so hard to actually sit down and say, oh, well, because I have women that come into my practice all the time and they're doing all the work. They've been in therapy for 10 years.
Oh,
They've
yeah,
read
I know.
all the personal development books. They've gone to all the retreats.
I know.
And they're refusing to really own that really deep belief that you're talking about, which goes right back to that first truth.
Yes. Yes. And it's just a blind spot. We all have these blind spots, right? And so, but it's very, I have to say that's part of the reason why I wrote the book was just to, hopefully, make the reader aware of some of their blind spots. And then, that's the best feeling, because then you're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that this was something that was going on. Then we have that sort of breakthrough moment of like, wow, so this is the thing that's been really holding me back.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. So tell us a little bit more, if you can, about where people can get their hands on the book and what you're really excited about with this book, because I know that it has been a while in the making. I've been listening to Jillian on love, and I know that it's something that your whole heart has been poured into.
Yes.
So can you just tell people a little bit more about where to find it and what they can, I know they know what to expect because we've talked about it, but what you're really excited about with this book?
Yeah. So you can find it wherever books are sold. So, and you can go online, it could be Amazon, it could be your local bookstore. So, and if you want to get it online, just go to my site, jillianturecki.com/book. And that's where you'll find it. You also find it at the airport if you're traveling. What am I really excited about, people? A lot, I've been getting so much incredible feedback on it. Like, wow, I never thought of this, or this is making me think of things in a totally different way. Ultimately, I want people to feel really to perhaps get what they haven't gotten yet in therapy, or to, just to feel very empowered. Yeah. That's what I want people to feel, is just very empowered and just feeling like, oh, maybe I can make a change. And as opposed to feeling just really sad and blue and down on the quality of their life, just down about the state of their love life. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that so much, because that's what breaks my heart the most, is that there are people who have been in therapy for years, and it's like they do have blind spots, and sometimes therapy doesn't touch it. That's what I see all the time. So I think that's a beautiful intention, and I love it. I love that that's what you're excited about for the book. I have one question that I ask every single person that I interview on the Align Love podcast. So I'm curious to know your answer. When you hear the words aligned love, what does that mean to you? Like, what lands in your body? What comes to mind when you hear those two words?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of like stability when I hear that.
Yeah.
Like internal stability, almost like the center line, the midline of my body, like aligned love. And I also think about, so that was the first thing that I feel in my body, like that's the sensation. And then what I think about is like two people who are on the same page and are really right for each other.
Yeah. And having that cohesion between the two of them.
Yeah, that cohesion. Yeah. And you can have that with yourself as well. But that's what I think about.
I love it. So beautiful. I get so many different answers to that
I know. I'm
question. I
curious
just
about some of
love
the
hearing
answers
it.
you get. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I know I
Yeah.
need to do just a podcast episode
You do. You have to
compiling
do like a
everybody's
mashup.
answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You should do
Yeah.
a
It would
mashup
be
for
super
sure.
fun. I love it.
Yeah.
So Jillian, all of everything that we talked about, the link to get the book, it is all going to be in the show notes. This has
Thank
been
you.
so beautiful getting to
Thank
interview
you so
you,
much.
and thank you for sharing your heart. Before we end for today, can you just let people know, which I'm sure everybody that is listening to my podcast is going to geek out that I'm having you on the show, but just in case there's somebody who has never been in your world before, can you let people know where to find you and where the best
Yes.
place to come into your world is?
Absolutely. So obviously my book, my podcast, which is called Jillian on Love, and you can find me all over social media. You just need to know the spelling of my first and last name. Instagram is probably where I spend the most amount of time. But yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Jillian, thank you from the bottom of my heart. This was such a beautiful interview,
Thank
and
you so
hopefully
much.
I'll have you on again soon.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Today's episode of the Aligned Love podcast. One thing that would really help me and the other new potential listeners is for you to rate this show and leave a comment wherever you tune in and listen. Also, make sure to link up with me on Instagram at Lauren Zoller, and please share this podcast with anyone who you think may enjoy it. Until next episode, remember, every transformation begins with one moment of awareness, and I hope today has been yours. I'll see you next time.